episode of the Daily Turnip. Thank you for joining in last week. We're really excited to get this rolling and brought back by popular demand. We have CK with us here today.
Yeah, it's great to be back after last week. I was sure I was getting sent back down to the G League, but we're back.
Well, thanks for making the time, CK. Really excited to jump in today. So, everyone, we have three really big things we want to cover. But before we do, I want to kind of give a highlight of what happened this week around the world. And so, the first thing that's happened is the California wildfires. I'm sure you've seen it all over the news. It's been everywhere. We just want to send our thoughts and prayers and, thank all the firefighters, everyone coming in to support just the horrible things that are happening in California and LA right now. The Biden administration has extended temporary status for over 200,000 people from El Salvador for a total of 18 months. Ohio's governor has signed a bill requiring schools to inform parents about healthcare changes and sexuality content in the curriculum. Alec Baldwin has filed a lawsuit for malicious prosecution after a judge dismissed the case related to the fatal shooting of or during the Rust fatal shooting. Migrants are being left stranded in a troubled resort as Mexico disperses them far from the U.S. border, and I'm sure that has something to do with the tariffs. Iran announced the development of a new special missile and unveiled an underground storage facility. And there are airstrikes in villages in western Myanmar that killed at least 40 people, according to local groups. All right, everyone, that was a quick recap of other news that we will not be going in depth this week. And so there's three things we want to cover this week that we think are very important, have been all over the headlines. We want to cover the United States and potentially buying Greenland, the United States and everything going on with Panama and the Panama Canal. And then we are finally going to talk about Trump and his cabinet picks. I know there's been a lot of people messaging me, hey, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? We are excited to get into it. So first off, let's talk about Greenland. So Donald Trump has expressed interest in purchasing Greenland due to its strategic geopolitical location and vast natural resources. Greenland is rich in rare earth minerals, oils, and natural gases, which are critical for electronics and defense systems. Additionally, its location near the Arctic Circle makes it a valuable asset for military, for trade routes, especially as the ice melts. It is opening up new shipping lanes. Trump has also linked his interest in Greenland to national security purposes, aiming to reduce reliance on China or Chinese imports and assert U.S. dominance in the region. The idea aligns with his America First policy framework, focusing on securing critical resources and enhancing U.S. influence. So, CK, I want to turn it over to you. So, is buying Greenland, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Honestly, is it even possible? Like, what should we be thinking right now?
Yeah, let me start by saying that this didn't start with Trump. Did some research on that. This has been proposed throughout the history of the United States 1867, 1910, 1946, 2019. And, it's been floated by politicians more than that. So,
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, because Greenland has always been this huge piece of land, untapped resources, um, strategic advantage. So Trump is not the first one, and to say like this guy's a madman, we've been trying to get our hands on this place since.
So something similar to, hey, we bought the Louisiana Purchase, we bought Alaska, so just kind of following that playbook.
Yeah, yeah. So is it a good thing? I mean, it would absolutely be a good thing if it just fell on our lap. Now, the repercussions of how we got to taking it might not be a good thing in the long run, but to say we got this giant piece of land which has 17.5 billion undiscovered barrels of oil and 150 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, yeah, that's a good thing. Not to mention the strategic asset. We have one base up there, and we use it. It's our primary surveillance for NORAD. We use it to surveil the Arctic, and we could expand upon that if it was our land.
Okay, okay. N- now, if we were to acquire Greenland, how would that change geopolitical dynamics? Would China be like, hey, you know what, we can invade Taiwan now? And let's say we acquire Greenland in a very peaceful way. We should not go down the rabbit hole that we can, acquire through military means. Now, but would this give new reason to China? Would it make, Russia trying to acquire Ukraine? Would that kind of situation change a little? Because in a way, it's still manifest destiny, right? It's still acquiring land. It's still changing borders, and that really hasn't happened, since post World War II.
I don't see acquiring Greenland to be any more intrusive on our peer, adversaries as like expansion of NATO. So I
Okay.
don't think so. I could see it, starting to tear between U.S. European relations, because the big question is how would we do it? Outside of like just annexing it and going to war and saying it's ours now, which isn't feasible, or and it won't happen. It's unrealistic. What seems to be the play is that Greenland has been hoping for its own independence,
Yep.
and they're trying to cut that cord. The people of Greenland seem to be using this to bolster that. So I think that's the most likely thing to happen is all of this news is like a springboard for Greenland to get its own independence. But maybe apparently there is a pretty good popularity of Donald Trump, and he just sent an envoy there. So
Yep.
maybe
I saw
they
that.
vote to join them. I don't see that happening, but possibly. Now, the one thing I did see is I just mentioned how much natural resource, 17.5 billion barrels of oil,
Yep.
and 150 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Denmark banned them exploiting that natural gas and that oil. They're not allowed to since 2021 because of climate change.
Oh, really?
95% of their export is fishing. And so if you think like, if I'm a businessman and entrepreneur in Greenland, yes, I want to be in the United States because drill baby drill. They're gonna they're gonna I can get rich with U.S. especially Trump policy being a a piece of land owned by the United States.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I really see Greenland using this as a reason to break free from Denmark. Obviously, they're doing their calculations. They're saying, "Hey, is Denmark giving us enough resources, enough support, enough XYZ to justify staying underneath them?" And I don't think they are. To your point, like what they have most of is oil. Who's making all the money off oil? Oh, it's Saudi Arabia. Oh, it's the Middle East. Oh, it's the United States is making a ton off of. And Greenland and Norway makes so much money off oil, and that's how they pay for all their social programs that they have is from that oil. And so Greenland's kind of looking like, hey, we kind of missed the boat on this because now we care about global warming. Oh, by the way, we'll make such a little difference when you look at countries like China and India that are doing more damage to global warming than anywhere else. So if I'm someone from Greenland, I'm like, hey, we can have money like Saudi Arabia because of our population. We can do things that have never been done, change the lives, make Greenland amazing or at least better than what it is. We can't do that under Denmark rule. Let's use the United States to get there. Now, if they separate from Denmark, do you think Greenland most likely would just be like, hey, let's just have this amazing relationship with the United States? We won't be a state. We won't be like a territory like Puerto Rico. We'll be the closest ally you can possibly imagine. You can bring on ExxonMobil, you can bring Shell, whatever companies, and let's have an amazing partnership, build as many military bases, use our trade routes. You help us make our citizens rich to oil, and you can use our country how you want. I think that may be one of the more realistic outcomes in this.
I think that's right. Why would they use the U.S. to get independence from Denmark just to go ahead and turn around and be subjugated by the United States after?
Yep, exactly, exactly. All right, no, thank you for that, CK. Really appreciate it. So let's dive over into Panama Canal and let's take a look at this. So Donald Trump has expressed interest in the Panama Canal due to its strategic importance for global trade and national security. National security, it's kind of a trend here. The canal is a critical maritime route that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, significantly reducing travel time for ships. Control over the canal would give the United States a significant advantage in terms of trade and military logistics. Trump has also raised concerns about Chinese influence in the region, as Chinese companies manage ports on either or on both sides of the canal. He believes that the United States control would prevent potential threats from foreign powers and ensure the canals remain open for American interests. So, CK, I'm going to give you the same questions. Hey, is getting or regaining control of the Panama Canal a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Are we just going to make things worse with other countries? Is it even possible? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. So two separate questions, right? Is it a good idea and is it feasible? The first, is it a good idea? Absolutely. Again, Trump's right, and people will say no. China doesn't own the Panama Canal, and it belongs to the country of Panama. But and I was reading fact checkers saying this, and this is how they would word it. All the China-based company holds and manages ports on both sides of the entrance, and they're also building construction of a new bridge over the canal to the tune of over 1 billion. This does not equate to control of the canal's operations. Have you seen what this is the China 101 playbook. This is what they've been doing. They do these huge milcon constructions, uh, build infrastructure for these countries, have massive interest rates, and when they can't pay back the debt, they say no problem. We'll dual use it. You can use it for what you need, and we'll use it for our PLA Navy. And that's that.
Exactly.
So to say that China, no, because it belongs to Panama, but China just owns all of the infrastructure. It's not China. Yes, it is. That's exactly the playbook. That's what they're doing, and it should be a concern for us.
No, I think that's such a fair point too, and so I'm a little split on this, or I'll kind of give a similar take. Where one, it definitely is a national security threat. To your point, if you research any Chinese involvement in Africa or during their new Silk Road that they're trying to build, the Belt Road Initiative, same exact playbook. Hey, pay us back. Oh, you can't. Oh, by the way, we own this for 100 years, and you can never pay it back. And we're just building all these bases and doing whatever we want. Same thing's going to happen to Panama, and as the United States, it's like, whoa, this is in our backyard. This trade route affects us more than anyone else in the entire world, and China knows that, and that's why they're trying to get into it right now. But at the same
Not
time,
gonna happen. It's happening.
yeah, no,
They
exactly,
have
yeah,
it. They own
yeah,
two ports and a bridge.
which is terrifying. And then at the same time, you can be like, whoa, yeah, Panama is still a sovereign nation; they can do what they want. Well, at what point do you just watch things that are directly against the interest and the self-preservation of your own state and be like, you know what? Panama is a sovereign nation. If they want to align with China, that's fine. It can only shut down our economy because of how important that port is. And so that's where you walk that fine line, why politics and foreign affairs and geopolitics is such a messy and painful business. It's like sometimes you have to be the bad guy in order to protect your nation. And I guarantee, CK, I bet all the money in the world that if it was up to United States making sure those trade lanes stay open, or your next iPhone costing $20,000 and eggs costing $100, and all these other things that would go exponentially higher in price because of just the trade we lost, every single American would be like, "Oh, I can't afford groceries now. Like I legit can't afford groceries, or I can't afford electronics." Nah, take that port back. Go back and invade Panama. We don't care. And so it's nice having an opinion when it doesn't affect you, but we're trying to get ahead of it, trying to be proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, and it's not like we have zero claim to Panama Canal. We built it, and
Yeah, that's fair. That's so
we
fair.
owned it and operated it until what 1999 is when we officially gave it back. I think Jimmy Carter started to give it, but it was officially given into the control of Panama in 1999. I think you can fact check me, but we have a claim to it. You can argue the validity of that claim, but it's not nothing.
No, no, I absolutely understand that point, and I'm really interested to see how things work out. Because more than anything, if Trump says something, people react to it. Maybe it's an empty threat. Maybe it's just him and his negotiating deals. But if I was a betting man, I would see things shifting in Greenland and Panama throughout this year, and the status quo from right now changing.
Yeah, Panama's tricky though because it doesn't seem like there's no open door. Like Greenland has an open door to maybe do it peacefully by using their people and garnering their independence. Panama, there is no open door for that, and I don't see how we get it back other than taking it back.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that road is much, much stickier than Greenland. But all right, let's transition over to the cabinet picks. I know that is what a lot of people are listening for today. And so CK and I were talking about it, and there's really four that we want to cover. There's so many cabinet picks, we just don't have the time. And I actually don't think the vast majority of people care about every single pick. So the first one I want to talk about is RFK, very controversial. And so I'm just going to give a quick highlight reel of some of the things that he wants to do, some controversials, and I'll hand it back over to CK to get a little more insight. So RFK, full name is actually Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has been selected as President-elect Donald Trump to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Kennedy is a prominent vaccine skeptic and has outlined several key policy positions and changes he wants to implement. So when it comes to vaccines, RFK is known for criticizing vaccines and has made a lot of claims that they're linked to autism. And depending what media source you want to read, it's either hey, this is fake, or no, there's a lot of truth and validity to this. He opposed state and federal COVID-19 restrictions, but insisted that Americans who want vaccines should have access to them. He's also very against processed foods. He calls for banning of hundreds of food and the chemicals that we put in our food, most notably the red dye. And he's aiming to reduce diet-related chronic diseases. He's also, talked a lot about the nutrition guidelines. RFK wants to overhaul the nutrition department at FDA, criticizing it for not protecting children. By the way, that food pyramid we all grew up with grains on the bottom and being the biggest one. That was a lie. That's not healthy. That food pyramid does not indicate proper health. I know when I learned about that, I was like, my entire childhood's a lie. This isn't good. Next, drug research. He advocates for directing half of the National Institutes of Health research budget towards preventative, alternative, and holistic health approaches. And then fluoride, which has been all over the internet. RFK has called for removing fluoride from public water, claiming it lowers children's IQ. So, CK, there's a lot to dive into here. There's so many different topics, and we could probably spend an entire episode on RFK, and maybe we will one of these times. But why is RFK good for America? Why should we be concerned or skeptical about it? And then what's most likely going to happen with him leading the Department of Health?
Yeah, I think we can start with food because I think most people on both sides of the aisle are in agreement that the FDA, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of problems, and there's a reason our food is different than Europe and different than Canada. But you still see some media fact checks. There's another fact check I'm pulling out of my pocketbook. New York Times this time said RFK was wrong when he was comparing Canada's Fruit Loops and America's Fruit Loops. He said RFK said we need to make it like Canada's because they have way less ingredients. New York Times said he was wrong. The ingredients list is roughly the same, although Canada's has natural colorings made from blueberries and carrots, while the U.S. contains red dye 40, yellow 5, and blue 1, as well as butylated hydroxytoluene, a lab-made chemical that is used for freshness. So them calling it roughly the same, except those three poisons, is ridiculous. And
Yeah. And that's why it's so hard to trust mainstream media. It's just like a manipulating headline. Hey, if you're anti RFK, hey, we can manipulate the words to try and change the narrative. That's oh man, that's terrifying.
yeah, and there's a lot of things you can bring on RFK. He's given skepticism against the polio vaccine, things like that. You can look at the legitimacy of those claims, and you can say, okay, maybe that's a little too far. But I think he's pretty spot on, at least with food, and he's getting support from people like Bernie Sanders, and that's where maybe he should start there, work on both sides of the aisle, and take down big food and make America healthier, and then we can start talking vaccines. It's an uphill battle though because a lot of Congress is in the pocketbook of all these big pharma, big food, and so he's got an uphill battle.
Yeah, and I find it really hard too because like, hey, who do we trust? What do we trust? Do we believe RFK? Do we think he's crazy? And when you start following where the money is, you see that big pharma influences a lot of what vaccines we should get. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I implore everyone to Google how many vaccines from when a baby's born until they're 24 months old, how many vaccines they should have in the 1970s. 80s, 90s, 10s, and then today you're going to see it drastically increase from the 90s. I believe it was around 12 to 15 shots you're supposed to get within your first 2 to 3 years. Now it's over 40. And I understand that, new technologies happen and maybe that has equipped or equated to adding 1 to 2, 3 new vaccines. But if you're talking about adding 25 to 30 vaccines over the course of the last 20 years, just from that alone, it's very hard for me to believe that this is the best for children, the best for us, and it's not just big pharma trying to make more money. And so, if you kind of look through that lens, it might be a little easier to be like, okay, RFK may be right. Now, he may be too extreme on some things, and we can cross those bridges. Like, I'm not here to talk, hey, is fluoride the right conversation to have right now? But I am willing to talk about, hey, we know in America our food is terrible for you. It's preservatives. I lived in Europe for 3.5 years. The food is so much cleaner. It's better. It tastes better. It's better for your body. You don't get sick. And so what I think is if he can fight that battle on food, if he can start just peeling on you back on vaccines, I'm not saying go full crazy. I think that would leave us in a better position. But realistically, it's going to be a horrific 4 years of fighting for him. And if he can get red dyes and a few other things banned, that's a win. But CK, I think he's fighting a losing battle that's going to be so hard to fight.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone to do your own research. Don't just listen to the 12-second clip of what he said. Listen to what he said before and after. And maybe, just maybe, the billionaires that run these companies are in it for the money sometimes over people's well-being. Just maybe some of those times, everything they're spoon feeding you isn't the best next thing.
Exactly. So I think we're probably somewhere in the middle. I think he has a lot of great things when it comes to foods and relooking vaccines and seeing who's really funding the desire for us to get more vaccines. And then, he says some things out there that, hey, maybe they'll be right in the long run, but let's focus on these now because we know that this needs to happen. All right,
Exactly.
let's change over to the next pick because I still want to be respectful of the time and staying good with that. So I want to look at Pete. I'm going to mess up his last name, Pete Hegseth. Hopefully, I got that right. It was nominated by Donald Trump to be the next Secretary of Defense and has some bold plans for the department. So CK, I'm going to kind of do some really high level topics that to cover him, and I'm going to hand it right back over to you. So Pete wants to restructure the military. He has talked about firing a significant number of generals and admirals who support DEI initiatives aiming to focus solely on warfighting. So he's saying, hey, I don't care about anything except your ability to fight and win wars. That is the only thing that matters. He has gone out. I think I even listened to this podcast take where he wants to limit women's roles in combat. He's expressed this opinion about women serving in combat roles, arguing that it complicates military operations. We just spoke about him wanting to eliminate DI programs. He also wants to increase military readiness. He aims to reassert the United States as a global power by focusing on military readiness and addressing internal issues he perceives that is weakening the military, and then utilizing the real threat of violence and just being prepared for America to take the next step. And then when you also look at his credentials as well, people question his credentials. He was what I believe only a major in the U.S. Army, and then he was also on Fox News. So, CK, let me turn it over to you. Should we be excited? Should we be concerned? Should we be skeptical? And what's most likely going to happen with him serving in that position?
I think skeptical is right. I
Okay.
want, there's definitely good that could come. He's definitely inexperienced, and he's, a Trump mouthpiece, right? He was probably picked because of support over everything else.
Yeah.
What we can be hopefully excited about is we're facing the worst retention and recruitment crisis since Vietnam, and I think it's even worse than after Vietnam. But the policies he's talking about, I think, strikes a chord with the base of people signing up for the military. When you look at per capita, which states have the most military recruitment, it's Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, Alabama. That's your bread and butter if you're recruiting. And the things he's saying is speaking to those people. And so Best case scenario, he fixes recruitment and retention, and people want to join and serve again. Worst case, we get into a big war and we have a Secretary of Defense who has no idea what he's doing.
Wow, I think that is some great polar opposites. Talking about recruiting, a lot of people that haven't served in the military or not familiar with it don't understand or know how big of an issue this is. We have over 100, I think 150 bases around the world. We have such a massive global presence, and we can't fill our ranks. We can't. We simply can't. And now you're just put in a tough position. So if he can increase recruiting, that's a big win. But to your point, what I want to hit on the most is he doesn't have that traditional level of experience. Normally you see a lot of 3-4 star generals take this position. Someone that's been around the block, has been in this game for really, really long times, and he was only major in the Army. Congratulations, not taking anything away from everyone that has attained the rank of major, but it's not a general. And he was a Fox News host. He wasn't working in State Departments. He wasn't working in that line of work. And what my fear is, or what I'm most concerned about, is he's going to be in conversations with other world leaders, with the best of the other world leaders, and he's not going to have that that background to back him up, and he might get bullied around. We don't normally see that with this position on the world stage, but that I think that's a healthy level of concern. He may get bullied around and pushed into things that are not in the best interest of the United States.
Yeah. Now, I will say traditionally, the SecDef is a civilian. Mattis and
Wasn't our last one, our last two, like both 4 stars?
the last two were, and they were unprecedented. It was like the first time in like 30 years, and then they did it back to back.
Oh, I guess I'm only living off the last 8 years then.
Yeah, and so the good news is, like, we're not looking for Norman Schwarzkopf, Colin Powell, right? We don't need someone who's an excellent tactician and a warfighter. That's not his job. He's recruitment, retention, policy development, planning, resource management, and program evaluation. And the other good news is that what has been the standard for the U.S.? It's been Dick Cheney, former SecDef, Donald Rumsfeld, Mark Esper, big military industrial complex guys. If you're against that, if you're against perennial wars, well, maybe this is the answer. Now, maybe it's not the answer if we do find ourselves in a war, but if we're looking to stay out of the wars, maybe that's exactly what we need, is someone that's fresh, that's not coming out off of the board of Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, and that's not part of that complex in the system. That's exactly what Trump, I think, wanted, besides someone that's going to tell him yes.
No, that's funny. No, I think that's a really great point, and something that Trump has been very on brand for, and was for his first 4 years, is, hey, no new wars. He's really big on that, and so if he can keep that, I think it'll make a lot of people really happy. But what I want to do is I want to transition to our last two, and I kind of want to bundle them up a little because they're kind of in that same line. So I want to talk about Tulsi Gabbard. She was nominated for the Director of National Intelligence. And then I also want to talk about Kash Patel, who was nominated to be the FBI Director. So I'm going to give a quick little spiel about both of them, and then CK, I'm going to let you run away with it because I know you're ready for this. And so Tulsi is very controversial. So she did the reversal on FISA Section 702, where she changed her stance on Foreign Intelligence Service Act. So that's what FISA stands for, which allows the collection of foreign intelligence on non-U.S. persons abroad. So he previously opposed it, but now supports it after lobbying with Republican senators. She's accused of promoting Russian propaganda by her critics. They're attacking her for her lack of intelligence experience. She's also been criticized for her foreign policies, where she was a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy, describing it as imperial and heavy-handed. And then she does have a lot of military experience. She served in the Iraq War, deployed to Iraq. She is a veteran of the Iraq War, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army Reserves, and her military background brings up a unique opportunity for the intelligence community. She has an independent point. She was once a Democrat, now she's Republican, so she's willing to kind of move to where she feels just, and she does have a very, very diverse background. And then just to talk about Kash Patel real quick, he wants to restructure the FBI. That's one of his biggest things. He wants to attack the perceived bias. He wants to increase transparency and he wants to focus on accountability. So, CK, I'll just hand it over to you. Which one you want to dive in first? What are your thoughts? Good, bad, concerned? What's most likely to happen here?
Well, first, no one should be surprised, right? Trump, if you ask Trump who his biggest enemy was in the first term, it was the intelligence community. They
Yeah.
went after him and he went after them. And I don't think he was happy with his picks in the first. And so he went pretty radical with these two. Um, I'll say a basis claim on Tulsi is, say, inexperience. She's not experienced in intelligence per se, but I mean, she's done it all and clearly can adapt and run. Whether it be Congress or the military, or running for president. I think she's certainly proven that she'll be able to fit in nicely and get to work. Now, if you don't like what she'll do, then, maybe that's a proper claim. But Trump wanted to shake things up. That's exactly so. So it should be a surprise to no one. Kash Patel, his big thing is transparency. He wants to make the FBI and CIA, well, FBI now, transparent. He served as a former deputy director of national intelligence, and all he's talking about is unclassifying. He wants 24 hours of unclassifying. He talked a lot about declassifying the Epstein black book and everything like that. Now we'll see. A lot of people say that. Everyone says that. We'll
That's
see
so
what
true.
happens day one, but hopefully there's more transparency, because if you ask a lot of people, they think the FBI, the CIA, the intelligence community, they're doing their own thing. There's a lot of people who think they were involved with JFK assassination. I mean, you name the event, you can find a million people that say CIA was involved, and for some of them, they probably were involved. So, who are they working for? Are they working for the deep state, or are they working for you? I think these moves, hopefully, best case scenario, realigns them where they're working for the American people and not working for the power.
No, I like that a lot. And to your point where you're saying, I don't think these choices, at least Tulsi, is a surprise. Her and RFK, when they decided to join Trump, leave the Democratic, RFK dropped his, because he was running, dropped out to support Trump. There's no surprise. They brought tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of votes to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump rewarded them. And you can say, hey, they're just selected because of loyalty and they'll be yes men to Trump. Honestly, really name me a president that didn't select people loyal to him, and the vision and what he wanted to accomplish. So I think that's a little bit of a weak argument. To be hopeful about Tulsi, like she did not like the direction that things were going in. She is a vocal critic, and I think putting her in that position, not having a person that's been a part of that deep CIA, that's born and bred and hasn't left, and that's all they know, and their allegiance isn't to America, it's to the CIA, it's to the agency. I think that could be really good. Uh, and that transparency, I mean, come on, right? There was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, and we still don't know anything about the person that tried to assassinate Trump. And we know everything about the assassin that killed the United Health CEO, right? And so there's so many things that are going on, and we're just left in the dark, and we only know as much as big media will let us know. And so I think a healthy amount of transparency is good. Now, I don't think 100% transparency is good. Secrets need to exist for a reason. We don't want everyone knowing everything. That could be absolutely terrifying. But I think a healthy level of transparency will go a long way because CK, look at it. I think the last 2 years, we're moving and we're shifting. We don't really trust our government. We certainly do not trust big cable. That's why podcasting is becoming such a big platform. It's giving the independent voice a platform, and people are listening because you trust more, because you and I are willing to have an honest conversation. We're willing to call out each side. We're loyal to no one but the unbiased side. And so I think this cabinet is the closest cabinet that will change the norm. And if you are against the direction that the country is going on, if you're saying, hey, I think the country's been going on a downward slope, well, this is the cabinet that you could probably safely say things are going to change. I don't think there's another cabinet that has that potential with the leader. Now you can say, hey, I like the way things are, And if that's the case, you're probably not happy. But if you feel that things are not heading in the right direction, then you're probably more likely than not pretty excited about all these cabinet choices.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, CK, anything else you want to say before we wrap it up today?
Inauguration is 1 week away. I think we need to watch out for first 100 days. You know, Trump has talked a big game, bigger than he did in 2016. And unlike 2016, he's been working on this. He hired his own transition team, and he's been working for a long time. So I would expect a big splash, and I think his base is pretty much demanding, change and immediate change in a lot of areas. So it's going to be history.
Yeah. Yeah.
1 week
Maybe
away.
maybe that's our topic for next week, because I think, to your point, I mean, he's already had everybody and their mother over down to his house down in Florida. He wants to carry all this momentum so he can get things done. And so, to your point, I think these next 100 days are going to be huge. So maybe we talk about that one next week. I like it. But all
Awesome.
right. Thank you, CK. And thank you, everyone that has listened to the Daily Turn Up. We appreciate you so much. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please tell your friends. We're just excited to do this. We don't care if we get more than 100 listeners. Actually, that's our goal, is to get 100 people to listen. So if you're one of the ones, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're doing it for you. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.